Samsung's M series of phones have always been a great budget option, thanks to their AMOLED displays, great battery life, and above average cameras. So is the M31 more of the same, or has Samsung brought something else to the table? Well, let's find out in today's review. And oh, spoiler alert, it's more of the same. Hey guys, Amrita here from C4eTech, and if you do end up enjoying this video, then please subscribe and turn on notifications by hitting that bell icon. Let's now get started. Last year when Samsung came up with the M30s, we were really impressed. It was a significant upgrade over the M30 in almost all areas. In fact, the M30s even managed to bag our best mid-ranger from a Tier 1 brand award at C4E Awards 2019. So when the M31 came out, we went in with high hopes. However, despite being the newest device in the M30 generation, the M31 isn't that big of a leap forward. In fact, this is pretty much the same phone as the M30s. The only new thing here is the improved optics. So let's start with that. First up, we have a new 64 megapixel primary shooter in here with an f1.8 aperture. The colors and dynamic range are pretty good, and the photos do look quite sharp. Zooming in, there does seem to be a bit of over sharpening being done in post, and I could particularly notice it with the greens of the leaves. Now we generally do not get a huge difference jumping from 16 megapixel to 64 megapixel for these quad Bayer sensors, but on the M31, the 64 megapixel snaps have significantly better detail levels. Cropping in, we can see how clear the outlines and details of the yellow flowers are in this higher megapixel picture. Moving on to low light shots, the M31 has a dedicated night mode. That, combined with the quad Bayer technology and the big f1.8 aperture, means that we get bright looking pictures. The colors are retained fairly well, and Samsung's processing seems to favor details, which means sometimes we get a little bit of noise in the images, especially at higher ISO levels. We also have an 8 megapixel ultra-wide snapper in here. Now, something that I've always praised Samsung for is their color science, even on their budget lineups. It's pretty much the same for the M31. The pictures from the ultra-wide are close enough in terms of colors and dynamic range to the primary camera. This is one of the better ultra-wide cameras that we can find in the under 20k range. Moving on, we have a 5 megapixel macro camera in here. And once more, Samsung has done well. This one produces some bright images with good looking colors, and the detail levels are passable. Of course, there is no autofocus in here, and the 3 to 5 cm focal distance of the macro camera means we had to get really close to the subject. Even then, it is quite difficult to find the exact right focus, and some shots that we took came out looking a bit blurry. And finally, we have another 5 megapixel depth sensor. So this one is used for taking rear portraits, or as Samsung calls it, live focus. The edge detection here is fine for the most part. As with live focus, we can of course control the strength of the blur while taking the shot and even after it. We can also change the nature of the background bokeh in post. Switching to the selfie cameras, we have a 32 megapixel selfie snapper in here. By default, we get 12 megapixel photos that kind of end up a bit on the softer side. The skin tones though are excellent, and so is the dynamic range. We also have selfie portraits, and the edge detection here is decent. There's also an option to take full 32 megapixel pictures, but then we trade off HDR for some better sharpness. Moving on to the video side of things, we can go up to 4K 30fps. We have crisp but shaky footage at this resolution. Dialing it down to 1080p seems to offer the best of both worlds, since we still get reasonably sharp video with vibrant colors and electronic image stabilization. We also have super steady video through the ultra-wide lens, and as expected, the footage here doesn't have any shake, but there's a significant loss in quality. Overall, for the price range, the optics on the M31 do quite well. The 64 megapixel primary camera takes some impressive daylight shots. I personally think the 8 megapixel ultra-wide is one of the best in the budget segment, and the 5 megapixel macro implementation here is not a gimmick, like we have come to expect from most of the macro cameras out there. So overall, a very competent set of cameras. Now the rest of the phone, it's basically the M30s. So everything we said in our M30s review holds true here. So here's a card to that in case you guys are interested. As for the rest, here's a quick rundown in case any of the details have skipped your mind. The Samsung Galaxy M31 comes with a 6.4-inch Full HD Plus AMOLED panel with a water drop notch up top. Samsung calls this the Infinity U panel, and as expected from a Samsung display, we have vivid colors and inky blacks. The best thing here is that it gets bright enough that I had no problems with sunlight legibility. Moving on, we have the same Exynos 9611 processor in here that we had seen with the M30s. It is a 10nm chipset that when paired with One UI 2.0 can run through any basic day-to-day tasks which we threw at it. For the most part, multitasking was a breeze as well. So if you don't plan on gaming, then the M31 holds up pretty well. It comes in two variants, both sporting 6 gigs of RAM. The difference is one comes with 64, while the other has 128 gigs of storage. We even have a dedicated microSD slot for storage expansion. Speaking of SIM slots, call quality and reception was fine. My only complaint here is the single bottom firing speaker isn't too loud. And the placement means that it's pretty easy to cover with our hands, especially when gaming or watching videos in full screen. On the gaming side of things, the Mali G72 MP3 GPU inside the M31 can play most modern titles, but not at the highest graphics settings. We tried Call of Duty Mobile, and at the medium settings the game ran fine. But when we switched it to high, we ran into some lags and skipped frames. So if you're a mobile gamer, I'd stay away from the M31. There are other phones with better hardware in the same price range. We touched upon One UI before, so coming back to software, we have One UI 2.0 in here running on top of Android 10. Now we have dedicated videos on Samsung software, so I'm not gonna delve into One UI much. We do have an always on display in here, so that's nice to see. However, there are quite a few ads and bloatware that have been pre-installed. The good thing is most of it can be avoided during the initial setup, but the My Galaxy app kept sending push notifications a couple of times a day. Summing it up, the software experience here isn't ideal, but the ads aren't as frequent or intrusive as MIUI, and overall once we uninstall the extra stuff and block notifications from the My Galaxy app, the rest of the software experience was pretty good. Finally, coming to the battery, we have a 6000 mAh unit in here that lasted us well into the second day. The battery life here is one of the best. In fact, it managed to outlast all other phones in our battery drain test. So no complaints on that regard. I only wish Samsung could have included a slightly faster charger in here. 6000 mAh plus 15 watt fast charging means that going from 0 to 100 takes about 3.5 hours. Wow. Now one thing that I have to give Samsung credit for is that they managed to keep the weight of the phone under 200 grams despite packing such a humongous battery. Of course, that means we have a cheap plastic build here. It's sturdy, no creaks or squeaks, but doesn't quite give that premium in-hand feel as a glass sandwich design. Another thing that I noticed here is that Samsung seems to have improved the fingerprint scanner. The one on the M31 is quite a bit faster. We also have support for face unlock, and that seems to work fine. Samsung has priced the M31 at 16,999 for the base 64GB variant, and for the price, this is a pretty well-rounded phone. Sure, we can get better builds and more powerful processors. Heck, we can even get a 90Hz display now in the under 15K range. But for people who want to buy a Samsung branded phone, the Galaxy M31 offers a well-rounded package. The budget-conscious M31 comes with One UI, an AMOLED panel from Samsung, some of the best cameras for the segment, and a big 6000 mAh battery. Not to mention the service and support network of a tier 1 brand. So if all those factors matter to you, then go ahead, get the M31. It won't disappoint. For others though, I would suggest taking a look at the Poco X2 or the Realme 6 Pro. That's been my 2 cents on the M31. Now I want to know how you guys feel. Would you end up buying the M31? Why or why not? Let me know in the comments below. And with that, we come to the end of this video. Thumbs up, thumbs down based on however you felt about it. Share, subscribe and all that. And oh, turn on notifications by hitting that bell icon. Thanks a lot for watching till the end, guys. Have a good one. Cheers.